Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're jumping into something that, let's be honest, trips up almost every single person in academia. It's that classic, never-ending debate, active voice versus passive voice. You've probably been told a million times that there's a right way and a wrong way to write. But, well, the real answer might just surprise you.
So which is it? We found that, or it was found that? You've probably had a supervisor tell you that scientific writing has to be impersonal, totally objective. But is that really the whole story? I mean, is it possible that that age-old advice might actually be a little bit mistaken? Let's dig in.
Okay, this is really the heart of it all, right? On one side, you've got the traditional passive voice. It was found that the whole idea here is to sound objective by taking the person out of the sentence. But on the other side, you've got the more modern active voice. We found that, which argues for clarity by putting the researcher front and center.
All right, so first up, let's build the case for using we. And for our first piece of evidence, we're going to call a heavyweight witness to the stand, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world.
So what do you think? Does a journal as famous as Nature stick with the old-school passive voice to sound more objective? Or do they actually prefer the active voice because it's clearer? Or maybe they just stay out of it completely?
And the answer is, they have a clear preference for the active voice. Yep, Nature explicitly tells its authors to use phrases like, "we performed the experiment." And why? Because in their experience, it just makes the paper way easier for people to understand. For them, clarity is king, and it totally beats sticking to an old tradition of sounding impersonal.
So the argument for the active voice really boils down to these three big benefits. It's clearer because there's absolutely no question about who did the work. It's more direct. And something that's super important when you're dealing with strict word counts, it's almost always more concise.
Okay, let's put that conciseness claim to the test. Here's a sentence you could find in pretty much any research paper. The passive version says, conversion over 90% was achieved.
That's 6 words to get the point across. Seems fine, right? Nothing wrong with that.
But check this out. The active version says the exact same thing in just 4 words. That's a 33% reduction. Now, saving 2 words might not sound like a big deal, but when you do that over and over again in a long manuscript, those savings add up incredibly fast.
Need some more proof? Okay, let's look at arguably the most famous scientific paper of the 20th century. Watson and Crick, they didn't write a structure as suggested. No way. They opened their Nobel Prize-winning work with the direct, personal, and world-changing phrase, "we wish to suggest."
You know, this debate is so compelling, it even causes experts to publicly change their minds. In 2014, Dr. Mario Marlowe was teaching the old rule, avoid I and we. But just 2 years later, she published a follow-up piece, basically saying, you know what, I was wrong, and declaring herself a firm defender of the active voice. That's a huge shift.
But hold on, the case isn't that one-sided. This preference for the passive voice isn't just some random old habit. It's a long-standing tradition, and it's rooted in the core philosophy of what it means to be scientifically objective.
And I mean, many universities literally write this rule into their official style guides. This one here makes it crystal clear. Scientific text should be impersonal, end of story. So for generations, this is exactly what researchers have been taught is the only proper way to write.
And some people take it even further. For them, it's not just about style, it's about professional etiquette. This author suggests that using I or we can come across as being in poor taste, like you're being a little too informal or even self-important in a field that's all about collective, objective truth.
But okay, beyond all the tradition and taste, there's a much more practical, down-to-earth reason why so many scientists stick to the passive voice. And that's because the people who have the final say, the journal editors, often demand it.
Here is a perfect real-world example of that. An author submitted a paper, and the abstract started with, "we assessed." Seems pretty normal, right? Well, the editor's note came back, and it was blunt. Never use first person. And that was that. The author had no choice but to go back and revise the entire paper, changing every we to phrases like, "this work presents."
So what are you supposed to do? You've got giants like Nature on one side saying, use we. And then you've got other journals and maybe even your own supervisor on the other side saying, absolutely not. Well, the best answer isn't to pick a side and fight. It's to be strategic.
And here's where things get interesting. It might be surprising, but this is a perfect example of where the passive voice is actually better. Look at version 2. Notice how using "it was first discovered" keeps the topic,
penicillin at the front of the sentence. It just creates a much smoother, more logical flow. See? Here, the passive voice isn't a mistake. It's a strategic tool.
So this brings us to a kind of roadmap. The active voice is most powerful in the sections where you really need to highlight your unique contributions. Think about it. In the abstract, where you're stating what you did. In the introduction, where you're saying, we tested this. And especially in the discussion, where you express your opinions, like we speculate that. It's all about taking clear ownership of your ideas.
All right, so we've heard the arguments for clarity from Team Active, and we've heard the arguments for tradition from Team Passive. So what is the final takeaway for your next manuscript?
The solution isn't some rigid, unbreakable rule. It's a simple three-step strategy. Number 1, default to the active voice. It's usually clearer and shorter, so start there. Number 2, use the passive voice, but use it with purpose, as a tool to improve your sentence flow. And number 3, and this might be the most important one, be pragmatic. Your ultimate goal is to get published, not to win a stylistic argument. If an editor asks you to change it, just change it.
Ultimately, this whole debate forces us to ask a really fundamental question about scientific communication. What's more important? Is it adhering to an old tradition that's supposed to signal objectivity, or is it making absolutely sure that your reader understands your work with maximum clarity?
As a researcher, your writing voice is one of the most powerful tools you have. Now you know how to use both the active and passive forms to your advantage. And maybe the real takeaway is this: find your voice, but always, always choose your battles. Thanks for joining this explainer.